The word clung to me like a film I couldn't wash off. Not shouted, not even said with anger, just uttered like a minor inconvenience, as if I were the packaging around a gift that had already been opened and discarded. A burden. That word didn't just land on my shoulders. It slid beneath my skin, nested deep, and made itself a quiet tenant in my bones. I didn't cry. Not that day. My tears had been rationed long ago, saved for funerals, hospital beds, and goodbyes that never ended the way they should. But inside me something shifted. Not broken exactly, but loosened. Like an old screw finally unthreading after years of pressure. I replayed the moment later that night, alone in that sanitized little room with its narrow bed and laminated checklist of scheduled activities I never signed up for. He'd said it so easily, so matter-of-factly, like a diagnosis, like he'd just noticed it. But I had seen it coming. The glances between them. The way she started folding my laundry herself, even though I'd already done it. The passive-aggressive notes about healthy boundaries and independence left on the fridge like they were motivational quotes and not eviction notices wrapped in civility. They thought I didn't notice. That age had made me slow or blind, but motherhood sharpens the senses. You don't raise a child from scraped knees to recitals to adult disinterest without learning how to read a room with your back turned. I saw the way his wife winced when I reminded her about a parent-teacher meeting, heard the forced brightness in her voice when she told her daughter, "Grandma means well, sweetie," like my love was a traffic violation. I saw it in the way my son stopped calling me Ma and started calling me Mom. That extra syllable felt like distance. Still, I didn't think it would go this far. Not here. Not this fast. I looked around the facility that first evening, watching other women with their knitting and soft orthopedic shoes, and I wondered which one of them had once been called a burden, too. Who among them had buried their own sacrifices, had given everything only to be gently tucked out of sight when they no longer fit the rhythm of the household. I thought about my garden. The rose bush I nursed through storms, the tomatoes I used to plant with him each spring. I thought about the letter I found in his childhood desk once, where he wrote, "My hero is my mom because she never gives up." And now here we were. I sat at that little writing desk in the corner of the room and opened the journal I'd brought, the one I'd started when he was born. Page after page of memories inked in tired hands. His first words, his fears, the Christmas when all we could afford was a Lego set on clearance, and how I wrapped each piece individually just to make him laugh. I flipped to the last entry, written a few weeks before this whole conversation happened. I'd written about how proud I was that he'd built a life for himself, that even if he was busier now, I understood. I really believed that, but now I was beginning to understand something else, too. That love without respect grows cold. That service without recognition feels like servitude, and that sometimes, when people call you a burden, it's not because you are one, but because your presence reminds them of the debt they've never paid, the help they've taken for granted, and the backbone they forgot you had. I watched the sun begin to set through the narrow window. I remembered that swing set rusting in the backyard, the one he used to beg me to push him on, even when my back ached from cleaning houses all day. I remembered his laugh, his tiny hands clinging to mine, the promise I made to his father on his deathbed, that I would make sure our boy knew how to be a man, and I realized something heartbreaking. I had kept that promise, but somewhere along the way I forgot to make one for myself, until now, they thought they'd put me on pause, tucked me away like a dusty book no one reads anymore. But they had underestimated the fire that comes from decades of being overlooked. My usefulness wasn't something they got to decide. My value wasn't tied to laundry baskets and baked casseroles. I was still here, still sharp, still dangerous when underestimated. The next morning, I got up early. I made my bed like it mattered. I brushed my hair and put on my lipstick, not the subtle pink, but the deep wine red I used to wear in the 80s when I sold Avon door to door to keep food on our table. I wore it like war paint. And then I called my old friend Gloria, who used to run a business out of her garage and now managed a whole chain of elder care staffing services. We hadn't spoken in years, But the moment I said, "I need a favor," she said, "Just tell me when. Because here's what they never tell you. Just because someone puts you in a box doesn't mean you have to stay there. You can turn a room into a headquarters. You can turn silence into strategy." I started writing, I started researching, I started remembering all the things I'd put on hold to be their everything. And once I remembered, I got hungry. Not for revenge, but for recognition, for space, for the version of myself I used to be before they started calling it too much. The plan wasn't born from anger. It was born from clarity, from knowing that if they saw me as weight, I'd show them what weight really looked like. What it meant to be a pillar, not a problem. What it meant to carry a family and then walk away. Proud, poised, and absolutely unwilling to apologize for being needed. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the ignition. And in that quiet, bleached room, with its thin curtains and forced cheerfulness, I lit the first match. The fourth night, I timed the rounds. Nurse shifts ran every 2 hours, but there was a lull between 3 o'clock and 3:40 a.m. when the halls went still. I memorized the squeak of the cartwheel and the orderly's footsteps, each with a distinct rhythm. I wasn't paranoid. I was preparing. They thought they had put me somewhere soft, somewhere slow, where people wilt like old flowers and no one asks why. But I'd grown up in a house where the heat was cut in winter, where my mother taught me how to budget soup into 3 meals and never let them see you cry. That kind of upbringing doesn't leave you. It waits, crouched in your ribs, ready to rise when you need it most. I began gathering my documents into a file. One labeled property, one labeled accounts, one labeled medical. The staff thought I was a sweet old woman organizing her memories, but I was categorizing my arsenal. On the 5th day, I asked to use the community computer to look up a hymn for Sunday. It was password protected, but I'd raised a son who used to brag about his IT skills in high school. He had one password he used for everything: his old basketball number and the year he graduated. I tried it. It worked from there. I accessed my email, reset the bank password, logged the IP addresses from the past week and printed them quietly to the front desk where the printer jammed. I waited until the nurse was distracted helping another resident into a wheelchair and pulled the pages before they could see. The printout showed 2 logins from their house, one from her phone, one from his laptop. He'd drained $4,500.00 since I left. Not all at once, just little withdrawals. Slippery ones. A few hundred for groceries, another for home maintenance, and one cryptically labeled consulting. I knew what it was. They were building their future from my past. I had enough now to do more than suspect. I had paper. Paper doesn't cry. It doesn't lie. It holds weight in court, which was exactly where this was headed. Monica called back that afternoon, her voice sharp and swift. "You want to move now or let them hang themselves a little longer?" I told her I'd wait. Not out of mercy, out of strategy. Every day they acted without my knowledge was another nail in the box they were building for themselves. I wanted a trail, a full one, not just for me, but for every woman who'd been told she was confused when she was really just inconvenient. That night at dinner, I sat across from Mrs. Elkins, a former librarian with arthritis in her spine and a mind sharper than most professors. She watched me closely as I picked at my turkey loaf. "You don't belong here," she said quietly. I smiled, polite but non-committal. She leaned in. "I know what it looks like when they want you out of the way." Her son, she explained, had put her in a place like this under the guise of safety too. She'd given up a condo, a pension, and half her dignity before she realized it wasn't about her. It was about the inheritance they wanted early. I told her my story. Not all of it, just enough to say, "Me too." She nodded and pushed a sugar packet toward me. "Hollow it out. Hide your flash drive in there. They search the drawers sometimes." And just like that, I had an ally. On the 6th day, the activities director handed out coloring books and warm apple cider. I joined in, smiling as if nothing in the world was wrong. I colored sunflowers while memorizing the facility's emergency exit codes, which were conveniently posted near every elevator. I noticed that the assistant who handled visitor check-ins never verified IDs, just names on a clipboard. I began forming my exit not as an escape, but as an arrival. Back into the world they tried to lock me out of. The next call from Monica came with instructions. Don't confront him. Let me handle it. But I need you to get your original will. Do you have it? I did. Hidden in the lining of the overnight bag I'd brought from home. He hadn't thought to check it, too busy deleting apps off my phone. That will still listed me as executor of everything, still listed the house in my name, still made no mention of his wife, who now dressed like a queen on a couch I paid for. By the 7th day, I had memorized the routines, secured my evidence, and made my decision. I wasn't going to fade. I wasn't going to go gentle into the fate they wrote for me without asking my opinion. I was going to burn down the fantasy they built on the assumption that old meant over. I typed a letter, 3 pages, not emotional, just facts, dates, times, amount, screenshots, and a single line at the end. This is not a plea, it's a warning. I mailed it to Monica. 1 copy to the probate court, 1 to his HR department. Because if he thought he could drain me dry without consequence, he forgot who taught him how to sharpen a pencil and tell the truth, even when it hurt. That night I folded my pajamas the same way I used to fold his baby clothes. Softly but with precision, I sat on the edge of the bed and said a prayer. Not for peace, for timing. Because there's nothing more dangerous than a woman with nothing to lose and everything on paper. The moon shone pale through the window, and in its reflection, I didn't see a victim. I saw a witness who'd gathered every scrap of truth they tried to bury. And I knew. When I walked out of this place, I wouldn't be the one looking for an apology. I'd be the one holding the key. The days leading up to that final blow were quiet in the way only justice can be. Measured, relentless, inevitable. My hands trembled not with age, but with anticipation. There's something sacred about reclaiming your name, something defiant about refusing to disappear. And that week, I wasn't just fighting for my home or my accounts. I was fighting for every moment a woman over 60 has ever been told to sit down and smile politely while someone else signs away her life in ink she never touched. I remember the moment Monica handed me the final folder. Thicker than the rest, tabbed and color-coded like a battle plan, she laid it between us on the little round table in my hotel suite, the kind that tried to pass as charming with its dusty floral carpet and coffee machine that wheezed instead of brewing. But it was mine. I'd paid for it. I'd chose it. And after weeks of being shuffled like mail nobody wanted to open, the ability to choose anything felt like a throne. Inside the folder were the declarations, the bank statements, the emails Jason had failed to delete. There was a note from Dr. Patel affirming that my mental acuity and memory function remain within optimal parameters. Monica had highlighted that part. She liked flair. I like proof. She smiled as she walked me through every page, every signature, every fraudulent form Jason had submitted while pretending to sort things out. He had tried to become my handler, but instead, he'd made himself my defendant. We submitted everything to the court before sunrise on Thursday. The judge didn't even hesitate. Immediate revocation of power of attorney, full reinstatement of all financial and legal rights, and a pending investigation into elder financial abuse. Monica called it a slam dunk. I called it a reset. When the sheriff posted the notice on the front door of the house I once bought with my husband's life insurance check, I didn't flinch. Monica asked if I wanted to be there, sit in the car, maybe, and watch the locks get changed. I told her no. Watching my son lose something never gave me joy. He had already lost me long before the paperwork arrived. But Tyler hadn't. That evening, sitting on the bed with clean sheets and the balcony door cracked just enough to let in the twilight breeze, I dialed the number I used to call when he was 5 and afraid of the dark. He was older now, 16 I think, maybe 17. But I still had the number memorized. I pressed the call button, half afraid he wouldn't answer, half afraid he would. He picked up on the first ring. "Grandma?" His voice hit me like a photograph. familiar, a little deeper now, but still wrapped in that vulnerable eagerness only a child can have when they believe you're safety itself. "I'm okay, baby," I said, the words breaking as they left me. "I'm back." He didn't speak at first, just a sound, a sob muffled behind his palm, maybe behind a locked bedroom door so no one else could hear. Then came the words I hadn't heard in weeks. "They told me you were sick, that you were confused." I didn't know what to believe. I closed my eyes, leaned back against the headboard, and felt the weight of what he didn't say, the confusion, the guilt, the fear. "You believe me now?" "Yes," he whispered. "Yes. I always believed you. I just didn't know how to help." "That's okay," I told him, wiping tears I hadn't planned for. "You answered, that's enough." We talked until the line went quiet, not because the conversation ended, but because peace doesn't always need punctuation. Sometimes it just hums between two people who found their way back to each other after a long detour through someone else's lie. Later that night, I stood at the window and looked out over the street lights flickering like distant stars. I thought about the word resurrection, how it sounds dramatic, biblical, almost too big for what I'd done. But the truth is, I had died a little when they left me at that nursing home. Not all at once, but piece by piece. My name, my voice, my place at the table, my say in what happened to my life. They stripped those from me like peeling wallpaper, quiet and subtle, until the room looked nothing like it used to. But now I had all of it back. The next morning, I walked into the bank, the one Jason had tried to claim I no longer had authority over, and I closed the joint account. Not a word of drama, just a clean signature and a quiet smile. Then I opened a new one in my name only. No beneficiaries, no co-signers, just Dolores Mayfield. Independent. Undisappeared. I bought a new Bible too, not because my old one was lost, but because this chapter needed fresh pages. I inscribed the first, for the day I stopped being erased. Then I wrote the date, and I didn't stop there. I filed to have my will rewritten, not out of spite, but out of clarity. Tyler's name went first. Then a scholarship fund in my husband's name. Then a line that said to be withheld from anyone who tried to make me small. And as I signed the final line, I didn't feel bitter. I felt bright, because when they called me a burden, they forgot something. Burdens are carried. I carried myself. Through grief, through betrayal, through silence, and back. That doesn't make me weight, that makes me iron. And iron doesn't bend, it sharpens. The next morning I returned, not with vengeance in my step, but with precision. There was no need to rush. Every legal line had already been drawn, every safeguard double-checked. I wore my Sunday shoes, the same ones I wore to my husband's funeral, polished until they gleamed like resolve. When I reached the house, I didn't knock, I used my key. The real one, the one their locksmith hadn't changed because they assumed I'd never come back. With the law behind me, inside, the air was still too sweet, perfumed with artificial lavender and entitlement. A scented candle flickered on the console table, next to a vase of peonies that I didn't plant. I took one look at the arrangement and gently moved it to the floor, then ran a finger across the surface of the table. Dust. Superficial cleaning. Presentation without maintenance. That's what this house had become. A showroom. Not a home. Not a legacy. I began walking from room to room, carrying a yellow legal pad in one hand, writing down what stayed and what went. The embroidered curtains in the den I hand-stitched with my sister in 1983, staying. The oversized velvet chair Danielle ordered and covered in plastic to protect from wear, going. The hutch that held my china, staying. The live, laugh, love wall sign in the entryway, going. First, in the hallway closet, I found a stack of boxes labeled seasonal, but inside was my old wedding album. The one with the lace binding I thought had been lost in the move. It had been shoved behind a pile of Danielle's Christmas decor, as if my entire marriage was just another thing she hadn't known what to do with. I opened the album slowly, page by page, touching the photos not with nostalgia, but with a kind of reaffirmed ownership. This house was not just mine legally, it was mine spiritually. And there's a difference between occupying a space and understanding the bones of it. They had never known the difference. That afternoon, Monica called to confirm the locksmith had been scheduled for Friday. "We'll have full security in place by the weekend," she said. "Let me know if you see anything else out of line." I made a note to check the attic later for any documents they might have missed. Jason was clever when it came to passwords, but he was careless with the tangible. Danielle came by briefly that day, clearly avoiding confrontation. She lingered in the driveway, then walked back toward the house with a friend, whispering under her breath, as if I couldn't see her from the window. I didn't move. Let her see me. Let her feel the tension between entitlement and eviction. She didn't come in. She left 10 minutes later with a duffel bag and her pride clenched tight in her jaw. There would be no apology. But I didn't need one. Apologies are for misunderstandings. This had been a campaign. That evening Jason called. Twice. I didn't answer the first time. The second time, I picked up but said nothing. I wanted to hear the sound of his breath when he realized he didn't have the upper hand anymore. "Ma," he said. "Can we talk?" I waited. Let the silence speak. "I didn't know Danielle changed the accounts. I thought," he began but stopped, because the lie didn't sit right in his throat anymore. It choked. It got out of hand. "We didn't plan to. You planned enough to change the locks and reroute the mail," he sighed. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" I asked. "Explain it to me." "Pretend I'm the woman who put every meal on your plate from age 5 to 23. Pretend I'm the one who sold her wedding ring to buy your college books. Pretend I'm the woman you called crying after your first breakup. Oh, wait. I don't have to pretend. I was." He was quiet for a long time. "I'm sorry," he said. But the words landed limp, too late. "You're sorry now," I said. "But when you told that nurse I was confused, you weren't. You were certain. Certain you'd gotten away with it. Certain I was too old, too tired, too used to being quiet. Ma, I just..." "Don't," I said. "Not Ma. Not anymore. I'll always be your mother, but you don't get to call me that when you forget what it means." I hung up. No anger, no drama, just truth. The kind that stings cleaner than any insult ever could. The next day I started rearranging furniture. I took back the living room, removed the vision board Danielle had stuck on the fridge, ironic given how much of that life had been manifested from my checking account. I called in a cleaning service and asked them to strip everything down, not just mop and dust, purge, wash the windows, sweep the cobwebs, wipe away the fingerprints they left behind like graffiti on a chapel. I replaced their wine rack with my old sewing table, set up a shelf for my books again. Photos of my husband went back on the mantle, not in mourning, but in memory. I wasn't building a shrine, I was restoring a history. By the weekend, the locks had been changed, the security system updated. Monica sent me the final paperwork confirming Danielle had signed the acknowledgement of voluntary departure. Jason didn't sign. He didn't return. But a certified envelope came Monday morning with his signature on a typed letter. I relinquish all claims to the estate. I read it twice. Then I filed it in the folder marked proof of strength. That night I lit a candle in the kitchen. Not lavender. Cedarwood and myrrh. Earthy. Real. It filled the room with something heavier than perfume. Presence. I sat at the table alone. No son. No daughter-in-law. No laughter echoing down the hall, but I didn't feel empty. I felt sovereign. The kind of quiet that settles not because everything is gone, but because everything that doesn't belong has finally been cleared. And in that silence, I sipped my tea and smiled. Because sometimes power doesn't roar, sometimes it just returns home, puts its feet up, and exhales. The eviction countdown didn't arrive like thunder. It came like a faucet that wouldn't shut off. each drop echoing in a house too quiet to ignore it. The kind of sound that isn't loud, but somehow drowns you anyway. Every sunrise pulled another thread from the life Jason and Danielle had tried to stitch together with someone else's fabric. And you could see it, in the way Jason's posture sagged like a worn-out coat on a rusted hook, in the way his jokes died mid-sentence when no one laughed anymore. His authority wilted with every legal envelope dropped at their doorstep, and Danielle's curated online life cracked like cheap veneer beneath the weight of reality. She still clung to the illusion like it was the only thing that kept her from dissolving entirely, posting sunrise quotes in filtered coffee mugs, hashtags like fresh starts and grateful heart. Her captions were little sermons, but her eyes couldn't hold the message. And the neighbors? Oh, the neighbors. Suddenly their greetings returned with curious warmth, the kind of politeness that glances sideways but lingers just long enough to say, "We always wondered." The Johnsons waved from their porch, the same porch where they'd once turned their backs when I tried to say hello. Now their wave was a little too long, a little too knowing. Mrs. Lee from next door showed up with a warm loaf of banana bread, wrapped in a towel that looked like one I gave her 3 Christmases ago. "I missed your roses," she said gently. "Everything always looked better when you were here." I didn't say much, just smiled. "They'll be back," I told her, and I meant it. Not just the roses. Me. My peace. My presence. The scent of something real in a house that had been faking happiness for too long. Jason didn't try to fight. He didn't even make it to court. Monica's filings were a fortress, airtight and impenetrable. Every dotted line I'd signed, every bill I'd paid on time, every policy I'd left untouched in my name, all of it spoke louder than any excuse he could have summoned. He thought being quiet meant I was slipping. What he never understood was that silence can be a strategy. That quiet is often the sound of someone sharpening their teeth. The 7th day came like ceremony. I woke before dawn, dressed with intention. Navy blue slacks, ocean blue blouse. Steady tones, not mourning, not anger. Just clarity. The kind you wear when you've already decided not to look back. At exactly 9:00 a.m. I pulled into my driveway, and parked with the calm of someone arriving early to her own meeting. The sight before me was textbook retreat. Cardboard boxes stacked in uneven columns, an overturned planter on the lawn, a plastic-wrapped floor lamp leaning like it didn't want to leave either. Danielle sat on a hard-shell suitcase, eyes puffy, mascara smudged, her phone clutched like it could dial a different ending. Jason was gone. Hiding, probably, or pretending he had something urgent to do. But I didn't ask, I didn't need to. His absence said more than an apology ever could. I walked to the porch, pulled my keys from my bag. My keys, still on the brass ring with the tiny heart-shaped tag Tyler made in 3rd grade, and fit it into the lock. Turned. The door gave way with a soft click, like the house had been waiting for me all along. Danielle stood, suddenly animated. "You can't just walk in," she snapped, brittle as dry wood. I didn't even blink. "By midnight," I said quietly, "this house better be empty." She opened her mouth to argue, but I was already moving past her, through the hallway lined with faded family photos, through the kitchen still smelling faintly of something artificial and sweet, through the living room where memories used to wrap around the furniture like blankets. I stopped in the master bedroom, stripped of its trappings. No jewelry on the dresser, no silk robe on the door, just bare walls and the ghost of lavender. I took a deep breath. The air felt cleaner than it had in months, because sometimes peace isn't what enters, it's what leaves. By noon, the moving truck arrived. I watched from the 2nd-floor window as strangers hoisted their life into boxes that had once held appliances I bought. A microwave, a toaster oven, a blender still bearing the sticker from my wedding registry. By 3:00 p.m. they were gone. No final goodbye, no drama, not even the whimper of regret, just the low hum of an engine backing out and the sigh of a door closing behind it. By 5:00, the locksmith arrived. He changed every lock, handed me a fresh set of keys, and said, "You're home now." I offered him tea. He declined. I didn't press. Some goodbyes are meant to be quiet. I sat on the front steps with a cup of lemon balm tea, steam curling up like incense in the golden dusk. The sky painted itself in forgiving colors, soft orange, violet, the gentle pink of mercy. The roses in the yard were brown and brittle, but the roots were alive beneath the surface. They just needed water. Like me. That night, I turned down the bed I once shared with a man who loved me through real storms, not legal ones. I laid my head on a pillow that didn't smell like anyone else's perfume. The silence that wrapped around me wasn't empty. It was earned. The kind of silence that doesn't punish but restores. The kind that tastes like freedom. In the morning, I opened the mailbox and found it. A single sheet of paper. No envelope. Folded clean, like he couldn't bear to seal it. Jason's handwriting. Familiar and nervous. I read the note once. Then again. It said, "I know I can't fix this. I just didn't know what else to do. I thought I was protecting my future. I didn't realize I was burying my past. I'm sorry." I didn't crumble. I didn't ache. I didn't forgive. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to. I folded the letter and tucked it away in the drawer beside the deed and the latest bill I'd paid under my name alone. It belonged there, a record, not a bridge, an artifact of a time I survived, not something I'd ever step into again. Because some wounds don't close with time. They calcify. They become part of the architecture. You don't wait for them to vanish, you build around them, stronger, smarter, quieter. And you never again let someone who called you a burden hold the pen that writes your ending. In the days that followed, something shifted. Not loudly, not suddenly, but steadily, like breath returning to a body that forgot how to inhale without flinching. The house stopped feeling like a war zone and started feeling like skin I could wear again. I moved slowly at first, not out of fear, but reverence. I dusted picture frames with hands that no longer trembled. I rearranged the bookshelves, placing the old family Bible back on its rightful pedestal, next to the ceramic angel Tyler made in the 3rd grade, chipped wing and all. Every touch was a reclamation, not just of space, but of self. Tyler settled in with a quiet resilience, the kind children develop too early when they've been taught that affection has conditions and love comes with locks. But I saw the softness returning. Not all at once, in flickers. He started humming again when he brushed his teeth. He began leaving his shoes by the door like he belonged. And one night, I caught him in the hallway staring at an old photo of his father and me on the front porch. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. But the way he looked at it, studied it, told me he was trying to reconcile the man in the photo with the one who'd let him fall through the cracks. We developed a routine. Breakfast at 8, whether he was awake or not. Dinner at 6, phones off. Sundays were for slow mornings and long walks. I took him to the local library and got him a card in his name. He picked 3 books and finished them all in a week. "I forgot I liked reading," he said. I smiled. That's the thing about forgetting. You're always allowed to remember. The neighbors noticed he was staying with me. Some waved. Others asked questions with tilted heads and too sweet smiles. I didn't offer explanations. I didn't owe any. The people who knew me, really knew me, understood that when I let Tyler in, I was protecting something sacred. And the people who didn't, well, their opinions had long since expired. One afternoon, Tyler came home from school and found me in the garage sorting through old bins. I was sitting cross-legged on the cement floor, surrounded by boxes labeled Christmas, Summer Camp, and Dad's Tools. He sat beside me and picked up a photo from a loose stack. It was of him as a baby, wrapped in a blue blanket, sleeping on my chest. "Did I cry a lot?" he asked. "You cried when you were hungry," I said. "But mostly you just wanted to be held." He turned the photo over and read the note I'd scribbled. First nap at Grandma's. Safe, full, loved. He stared at it for a long time before placing it in his backpack. Like it was armor. That night he brought his homework into the kitchen and did it at the table while I cooked. I corrected his math while he quizzed me on his science vocabulary. It was mundane. It was magic. Somewhere between the smell of garlic and the sound of pencil on paper, I felt something mend that had been split too long to name. And then came the letter. A cream envelope, no return address, slid under the door while we were out grocery shopping. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwritten in Jason's familiar angular scrawl. I know I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to understand it. I'm in therapy. I'm sorry I hurt you. I hope one day you'll let me say that to your face. I read it twice. Then I placed it in the drawer next to the utility bills and the grocery coupons. I didn't throw it away. I didn't frame it. I simply filed it under to be determined. Because healing isn't a finish line, it's a season. And some things need to stay planted long before you ever see green. Later, Tyler saw me reading the letter. He didn't ask what it said, but he did sit beside me on the couch and reach for my hand. Whatever happens, he said, I like it here. I squeezed his fingers gently. Then here you'll stay. It wasn't a promise made out of guilt or desperation. It was a vow carved out of grace. Because I wasn't just reclaiming a house, I was rebuilding a space where nothing had to be earned to be deserved. A place where the locks matched the keys again. We bought more rose bushes that weekend. Tyler picked a yellow one and named it Second Chances. I planted it with both hands in the soil, not as an offering to the past, but as an investment in what still could be. A reminder that even roots cut too deep can sprout again, if given time, warmth, and enough light. That night we baked cookies. He measured the flour, I beat the eggs. When they were done, we sat at the kitchen table, eating warm chocolate chips off paper towels. He looked up suddenly and said, "You don't act like a grandma." I laughed. "What do I act like then?" He shrugged. "Like someone who knows things. Like someone who doesn't quit." I let that settle in the air between us like incense. Because he was right. And because finally, neither of us had to pretend anymore. The house stood steady that night. No arguments, no accusations, no fear tiptoeing through the halls. Just the sound of Tyler breathing in the next room, and the quiet joy of knowing that this time no one could take it from me again. The seasons didn't rush, they never do. But I felt each one settle over the house like a new skin. The winter that followed that fall was gentler than most, and maybe it was because the chill outside didn't match the warmth returning within. The house had rhythm again. Not loud, not perfect, but steady. Tyler's laughter filled the corners that had been quiet too long, and for the first time in years, I wasn't tiptoeing around someone else's moods. There were no sideways glances at the dinner table, no sighs disguised as conversation, just warmth, just space, just air. We didn't have to earn. Tyler took to his little art studio project with a kind of purpose that felt inherited. He sanded the door, replaced the hinges, painted the walls a bright, hopeful green. He even rigged a little solar lamp to hang inside so he could sketch into the evening. "It's where I think," he said one night, leaning in the doorway with pencil smudges on his hands, "where I can just be." I smiled. Because isn't that what every home should be? A place where you're not just tolerated. You're allowed, encouraged, seen. I caught myself humming in the kitchen again, too. Old songs I didn't even know I remembered. There were mornings where I'd stand with my hands in dishwater, staring out the window as the sun reached just a little farther across the floor, and I'd whisper thank you to the quiet, to the stillness, to whatever grace had carried me through. Healing doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with eggs sizzling in a pan, or the weight of a good blanket on a well-earned night's sleep. Then came that Saturday. The knock was soft but certain, the kind that doesn't demand but hopes. I opened the door, and there he was. Jason. Alone, not just physically. Alone in the way someone is when they've been stripped of every excuse. His skin was dull, his posture wilted. He didn't look like a man coming to reclaim anything. He looked like one finally ready to lay it down. He clutched a small duffel, cheap and wrinkled at the corners. It looked like it carried clothes, maybe a few scattered remnants of pride, but from the way he held it, you'd think it was lined with lead. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice barely audible. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I studied him, not the way a mother looks at her son, but the way a woman looks at someone who once tried to erase her. I saw no arrogance, no armor, just a man hollowed by his own doing. I stepped aside, not because I owed it to him, but because sometimes listening is its own kind of strength. Jason stepped inside like a guest who didn't know if he'd overstayed his welcome just by crossing the threshold. His eyes swept the walls, landing briefly on the hallway where his growth chart was still faintly visible under new paint. He sat on the couch, slow, careful. He didn't ask if he could, he knew better. Then he opened the bag and pulled out something familiar. A weathered photo album, its corners soft with time, my handwriting across the front in careful loops. "I found this in the attic," he said. "Thought it was lost." It wasn't lost. I'd hidden it the week I noticed Danielle clearing out the closets with a little too much efficiency. I had slid it behind a box of Christmas lights, next to the ornaments Tyler made in preschool. A quiet place, away from greedy hands and rewritten narratives. Jason opened it and turned the pages, one by one. No rush, like each image was a confession, a photo of his graduation. The three of us beaming in front of the school step, a shot of Tyler swaddled in the hospital, his tiny hand wrapped around Jason's finger. One of me and his father, leaning against the porch after painting the siding, paint in our hair, laughter in our eyes, joy so evident it didn't need a caption. "I messed up," he said, staring at the image of our younger, prouder selves. "I let her convince me you were a burden, that keeping you close would weigh us down." He swallowed. "I held the door while she pushed you out. I didn't speak. I didn't rush to fill the silence." His words hung there, heavy and necessary, and I let them. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "I just needed you to know I see it now. Everything you did. Everything I let fall apart." Finally, I said, "You didn't break me, Jason. You broke yourself." He bowed his head, and for a moment I saw the boy he used to be. The one who clutched my hand during thunderstorms, who asked if angels really watched people while they slept. That boy hadn't meant harm. But the man? The man had stopped looking for angels and started thinking he could outmaneuver them. Tyler entered quietly. He froze when he saw his father, his shoulders tensing like a shield. Jason turned, tried to muster something that might pass for familiarity. "Hey, bud." Tyler didn't respond. He walked to me, took a seat beside me on the couch, close, protective. A quiet claim. Jason saw it, felt it, the shift. Love doesn't trickle down through bloodlines. It stays where it's earned. His face folded in on itself, grief without tears. "Do you need something?" I asked, my voice even. He shook his head. "No, I just wanted to return this." He placed the album on the coffee table. "I'm staying with a friend, trying to get back on my feet. Looking for work." I nodded once. That was a start. Not absolution, but motion. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "I know I can't make this right, but maybe one day we can talk." "We'll see," I said, and I meant it, not out of cruelty, but out of honesty. Trust doesn't get rebuilt in the foyer. It takes seasons, too. After the door closed behind him, Tyler turned to me. "You okay?" I breathed deep. "Yes," I said. For the first time in a long time, I didn't carry the guilt in the room. Tyler smiled, reached for the album, and flipped it open. He stopped at a photo, him in my lap, chubby-cheeked and giggling, my arms wrapped around him like armor. "You always look so strong," he said. "I wasn't," I replied, smoothing the page. "I just refused to let anyone see me break." That night, we baked a pie. Apple cinnamon. His favorite. The house filled with the scent of cinnamon and cloves, of safety and sweetness. We danced in the kitchen while it baked, shuffling barefoot on tile, laughing to the beat of old jazz. Not for show, not for memory, just because we could. And when the pie came out golden and bubbling, Tyler pulled it from the oven, took a deep breath, and said, "This smells like home." And it did, because it was. Because I had fought for it, and because no one, no apology, no absence, no betrayal, would ever take it from me again. And as the days rolled on, that bloom didn't fade. It deepened, stretched, took root in places I hadn't dared believe could grow again, not just in the soil out front or in the walls of a reclaimed home, but in me. In the muscles that once clenched in dread when the phone rang, in the breath that used to hold itself like it was waiting for the next accusation, in the spine that had learned to bend, to carry, to endure, and now finally stood upright. Not from defiance, but from relief. Peace, I discovered, is not quiet because it lacks noise. It's quiet because it no longer has to scream to be heard. Tyler started inviting friends over. Just one at first. A lanky boy named Miguel, who said yes ma'am and helped take out the trash without being asked. Then two more. Kids who whispered, "Your grandma is cool," when they thought I couldn't hear. I let them sit in the living room, shoes off, plates in their laps, eating spaghetti I'd made from scratch, while the TV buzzed with a superhero movie. They were loud, they were messy, and it was beautiful. The house wasn't just alive again, it was joyful. At night, Tyler started leaving his door cracked, not because he was afraid, but because he didn't need to hide anymore. I passed by once, saw him asleep with his arms above his head, no tension in his brow, no worry folding his small frame into corners like it used to. That's when I knew. He was healing too. He wasn't just staying here, he was recovering here. Just like I was one Sunday morning. I found an old voicemail on my landline. Jason. His voice was strained, low. He said he didn't expect me to forgive him. He said he'd been seeing a counselor, that he didn't recognize who he'd become, that maybe he never really knew who I was, what I had held, what I had sacrificed, what I had meant. I listened once, deleted it, because it wasn't for me. It was for him, and I'd already laid that chapter to rest. Forgiveness is something I carry now, but not like an open door. It's a quiet understanding, tucked into the folds of my spirit like the soft lining of an old coat, present but not performative. I don't need them to know I forgave. I only need to know I've let go. And I had, fully, cleanly, without need for ceremony. I started writing again. Not just timelines and evidence and court-ready documentation. Real writing. Stories. Recipes. Lessons. A legacy in ink. A book, maybe. I titled it The Weight They Tried to Call Mine. Tyler found the notebook once and flipped through it. He asked if he could write something too. I handed him a page and a pen. He drew a tree. And under it, he wrote, "Where Things Grow Again." By spring, the roses had climbed halfway up the porch rail. Their roots tangled so tightly around the house's foundation, it felt like they were holding everything in place. On Easter morning, Tyler gave me a necklace. Nothing expensive, just a tiny charm shaped like a key. "It's not for the house," he said. "It's for you, because you opened everything back up." He was right. I opened my heart again. I opened the door when he knocked. Opened the blinds when the world tried to shut me away. And in doing so, I found that closure isn't about endings. It's about what you begin afterward. It's the soft click of a lock finally turning in your own favor. It's the light through the window, hitting the floor in the morning and knowing the day ahead belongs to you and no one else. Tyler turned 15 that summer. We threw a party in the backyard, just a few friends, a grill, music that made the fence shake, and balloons tied to the gatepost. I made his favorite fried chicken and sweet cornbread. One of the boys asked, "You going to be a chef someday?" Tyler shrugged and grinned. "I might. My grandma taught me everything, even how to do it with joy." That night, after everyone left and the stars came out, we sat on the steps in silence. I watched him watch the sky, and I saw it, that wonder, that unspoken belief that life can still be good, even after betrayal, especially after betrayal. He leaned his head on my shoulder and said, "I hope I can be like you one day." I kissed his temple and said, "No, baby, you're going to be better." And I meant it, because love isn't proven in grand speeches or social media tributes. It's in who shows up, who stays, who picks up the paintbrush, the shovel, the mixing spoon, who learns to live in the silence without breaking, who chooses to build where they were once buried. The world never apologized to me, but I forgave it anyway. And in return, I got this: a house that breathes again, a child who believes again, and a life that, in its quietest moments, sings.